Awesome. Well, hello, Taylor. Hello, Mary. Good seeing you on the stream. Hello, Hashi Talks. Super excited to be here today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to be talking about Packer, the plugin ecosystem, and more specifically, publishing Packer plugins to the masses. I should share my screen now. So let me go ahead and share. Let's see. And you see a lovely desktop. Here we go. So hello again, everyone. I'm going to be talking about publishing Packer plugins to the masses. And for those tuning in for the first time and not knowing too much about Packer, Packer is a tool for automating the creation of machine images and application containers across various cloud providers and cloud providers and hypervisors. If you're interested in getting a little more information on Packer, I definitely recommend checking out the Getting Started guide on learn.hashicorp.com. So for those that are familiar with Packer already, you would know that in Packer 1.7.0, or should I say right before Packer 1.7.0, 1.7.0 was released in February, publishing plugins to the masses really meant bundling, right? We had this process where we would bundle all of our third-party plugins, including those maintained by HashiCorp, into the Packer binary and then deliver one binary so that when someone downloaded Packer, they could easily run Packer and access all these plugins. So most folks would open up a PR against the Packer repo and ask the Packer team to sort of maintain it and sort of be the gatekeeper for any new changes that were made to that plugin for any third-party cloud services. As you could imagine, that was quite a bit of work. So in Packer 1.7.0, sorry, I'm going to take off my glasses. In 1.7.0, the game changed, right? The Packer team worked on splitting up the Packer core from the Packer repository, from the Packer plugins in such a way that we can make it easier for ourselves and for plugin maintainers to not only develop and release their plugins, but also make them discoverable by the user. So in 1.7.0, we released Packer Init, which was an automated way of installing third-party plugins. So instead of manually installing these plugins, you could easily install them through a command. We released the Packer SDK and the Packer SDC command, which was all this great tooling that we had stuffed into the Packer repository. And we made it available to the community for all the plugin maintainers, right? It made our life easier, so we wanted to make it easier for people to develop plugins and get it out there. And then lastly, we introduced this concept of remote docs, right? So one of the things about building plugins is getting users to actually use it. So we found that a lot of our users would come to packer.io/docs to look for these plugins or potential new plugins. And it was sort of a disservice to say that there were a lot of great plugins out there that we weren't showing because they weren't part of that monolith repository that everything was bundled in. So we wanted to solve that problem and have a way for users to bring in their documentation and register their plugins alongside all the other plugins, right? So with that, this is probably a good time for me to say, I'm Wilkin Rivera. I'm a software engineer here on the Packer team. And you can reach me at Wilkin Rivera or NYWilkin on GitHub. And today I'm going to be demoing the process for publishing, for registering your plugin on Packer.io. So, or what I like to call the 3 steps to improve discoverability. So, step 1, documentation generation, right? Generating docs for your plugin could be a bit involved, especially if you have a lot of configuration options. But on Packer, we have a way of auto-generating a lot of this documentation for your plugins using this command called struct markdown as part of the SDC command. So the way it works is you throw a few go generate statements at the top of your plugin config files or builder files or provisioner files, whatever plugin you're building. And when you run the go generate command, it's going to parse all of these files. It's going to extract their comments, and it's going to generate what we call doc partials or shared, sort of shared documentation that you can then include into your sort of full featured docs for your plugin, right? So this was a tool that was made available as part of the Packer SDC command, and we thought it was helpful to us, so we wanted to make it helpful, put it out there to the community. The second thing is documentation releases, right? So documentation is all good, but if you can't find it, it doesn't really, how should I say, it doesn't really help the user. So we wanted to think about how do we get documentation, especially for those plugins that we don't maintain, sort of our remote plugins. How do we get the documentation as fast as possible to the user? So we thought, hey, we are already releasing binaries for Packer Knit. Why not throw the documentation in there? So when users get the binary, they can easily access the documentation. So as you can imagine, we wrote a tool for that too. So we have this Packer SCD renders doc command. So this command takes the generated documentation that we use that was generated using the struct markdown command, and it then injects it into any sort of static documentation that you have, sort of using, if you're familiar with include or partials in different website engines, this does the same thing where we generate some partials and then render docs takes the files that are referencing those partials and it injects it so that you get a full feature doc with all of the partials rendered. And I'll show a demo of this in a minute. Once those docs are rendered, we figured, hey, let's simplify the process for releasing those. We have some scripts in place, and I'll show in a second, that will package up those docs and then make them available as part of your release. So far, we've generated some documentation. That was step one. Step two, we are releasing this documentation, right, that is generated. Now, if you're paying close attention, you see this docs folder, which is not fully generated. In there, you'll have some static stuff, right, because it's not everything that we can generate. But these two tools alone allow you to take generated docs and static docs and merge them together to create the beautiful plugin documentation. And then lastly, step three. Step three is registering this documentation, or just for sure, registering your plugin against Packer.io. So, we found that having plugins in a central location where our users can go and find them definitely makes it easier for them to find, for them to get up and running, with new plugins, or even, debunk some of the issues they might have with configuration options. So we didn't build this tool. The kit existed for quite some time, but we did build some cool processes around how we develop our websites so that we can kind of make this magic happen. So here I'm going to show a quick diff, right? So we have this one central file, which is called website data docs remote plugins. And in there, as a plugin maintainer, you can add this little snippet of code, which takes a title, a path, a repo, and then a version and an optional plugin tier, which again, I'll show in the demo. And once you open up this PR against a Packer repo to update our website, and once it's, and we essentially take it from there. We on the Packer team will take it from there, review the website, review your documentation, merge it, and lo and behold, your documentation is now on Packer.io. So with that, it's time for a demo. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my terminal now. No, not wrong way. Let's go this way. Perfect. Okay, so right now I'm in my terminal and I'm in this plugin which we call HashiCorp. HashiCorp is a HashiCorp is a plugin that we built internally for as a demo to show users how to create, or potential future plugin maintainers, how to create a plugin on their own. So there is a builder, which we're looking at right now. There is a provisioner and some post processors. So in today's demo, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we used auto-generated documentation using the struct markdown command. I'm going to show you how we include the docs as part of our release cycle. And then I'm going to show you a local version of this same website working with a new version of the plugin. All right. So first things first, quick git diff. So here, going back to the auto-generated docs. So the first thing is I want to add this go generate block at the very top of this file. So this is our common auth config file. And then I added some comments to the configuration fields. So with these two things in place, if I run go generate, it should generate some partials for me that I can then use in my documentation. So let's try that. So right now, I'm going to do that. Let's see what we have inside of our docs partials. So we have this docs partials directory, which has two files. So it's auth config not required and auth config required. So the files that get generated are named after the file, the Go file that the comments were found in, and then inside of the comments, you could, or sorry, inside the fields, you can add these tags. Required, true makes it a required attribute, or if you leave it empty or required false, it would make it what we call an optional. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this. So yeah, no, okay, perfect. So then I'm going to go ahead and do a quick go generate. So we have other tooling in place. So the Packer SDC command does a lot of generation. So I highly recommend people check it out if you haven't already. So if I take a quick peek at those files, we have these new files that were just generated. Great. So I'm going to go take a quick peek at the documentation. So in our documentation, as I mentioned before, we have these include statements. Right? And in these include statements, they basically reference these partials that were created. So they follow the same sort of directory structure. So our config was inside of common/auth.go. So here it created a directory called common/auth-config-required. So you kind of follow that convention. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And then I'm going to show the render. Right now, I want to start the process of releasing our documentation. So I'm going to go ahead and show the render command. So here I'm running this renders docs command. The source is pointing to my docs directory, which is the files that I have that reference these partials, these include partials. I have the location of my partials, which I just generated up here. You can see it's called docs partials, and then the destination. So where do I want the files to be written? So I'm going to overwrite the files that we currently have in the docs directory for this demo, and then I'll show you what we actually do when we release. So the command went ahead and executed, and we can clearly see, hey, replacing the include. So if I open up that file again, we're going to see very quickly that include no longer exists, and it has been replaced by the required attributes and the optional attributes. Right. So we're done there. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and clear my screen here, and I have some changes. So I'm going to go ahead and just restore the docs because we don't need those anymore. Okay, so how do we actually do this thing on release? So on releases, we use for releases on Packer plugins, we use Go Releaser. And in the Go Releaser config file, we have all the steps necessary for releasing the multiple versions of our plugins, but we also have a step for generating our docs. So here we have a make file, right? But this make file is simply installing the latest version of the Packer SDC, which gets released anytime there's a new version of the SDK. It runs that same command that I just executed, and then it packages that documentation directory into a docs.zip. Now, here we're safe to do this because on the Go Releaser, when we execute Go Releaser, we run them through GitHub Actions, and we don't commit anything back. So what we do is we temporarily overwrite the contents of the docs directory on that build, and then we package it up, right? In preparation for the release. So going back, oops, if I jump down to line 82, you see that as part of my release, we have this extra files glob, which includes the docs.zip file. So when we actually release a file, release a plugin, it will generate all the binaries and then push up the documentation alongside with it. So I'm going to switch over to my browser really quick so that I can show you what this looks like. Let's see. I am here. Perfect. So this is the Packer plugins HashiCorp repository. And you can kind of get a quick readme on what it does. But I'm going to click over to releases. And in the releases, we have 3 releases. We have the latest release, which is version 1. And then we have a dev release. So this dev release, really quick, you'll see that we have this docs.zip, which was included as part of this Go release, part of the release. And we use, like I said, we use Go Releaser for triggering these plugin releases. All of the information I'm talking about today, we do have a repository called the Packer plugin scaffolding, or should I say it's a template repository, which anyone who's maintaining plugins who may not be using it, or potential plugin maintainers, you can create a new repository using this as its template, and it will set you up with all the base configuration files that we're using locally. And we're strong believers of dog fooding our own tooling. So anything that you see here will get updated. Anything you see here, we use, and then we will update it anytime there's any changes that we need to make, to continue keeping the release process as easy as possible. All right. So going back to my terminal. So here we are. So we've released the documentation. It's part of our release. And now we want to get it onto, we want to register our plugin on Docker, on Packer.io, which is step 3. So I'm going to switch over to a different terminal here. And I'm going to open up this file really quick. So this is the remote data docs remote plugins file that I showed in the previous slide. Excuse me. And here we have this entry for HashiCorps, right? So we enter in this file, it's just raw, it's just JSON. For every remote plugin that we want to publish on Packer.io, we have a similar entry, right? Where we specify the title that we want to show up on the sidebar, the path, so it'll be packer.io/doc/HashiCorps, the repository where it resides, and then the version. So version could be, by default, it is set to latest. But since I'm going to show an unreleased version today, I've hard-coded that version. So this is a great way of pinning the documentation for your plugin. So if you're updating your plugin and making pre-releases or making releases and you don't quite want the documentation to go out yet, you can come in and pin your documentation to a specific version. And then there's this plugin tier, which it's a label. So I'm going to go back to, I'm going to go back over here, apologize. This label here, by default, anything that is owned by HashiCorp or within a HashiCorp repository will get the official label. And anything that is coming from a remote location, for example, like to our builders, like Ali Cloud, will get a community, right? So so what we do here, I'm switching again, my terminal, apologies. So what we're doing here is, since this is managed by a HashiCorp team, it would essentially get the official label, but I want to hard code it to community so that everyone can see the change. So I've made this change. And here you can see that the only differences are the community label and the version. And now I want to test this thing. So as you can imagine, we have some tooling for that as well. Big shout out to the website, to the web development team for making this so effortless. We have 2 commands that we run. First, we call the make build image, which builds a local Docker container for the of the website that you can run locally, right? And then you have the make website local, which runs this image that that was just built locally. Right? So I'm already running this, so I'm going to go ahead and flip over to that. But these 2 commands, make build image, will build a local container for you to use, and then you can run make website to actually run that container and spin up the website. If you happen to have npm installed on your system, you could actually do the same thing without Docker, running npm start and npm, to start the service, and npm stop within the website directory to shut down the web server. All right, so I'm just going to switch over. So this is the Docker container running here. So let me go over to my browser somewhere. Okay, perfect. So quickly going back to our HashiCorps, we can see that this is HashiCorps order builder. It's the official one, right? This is currently what is deployed to Packer.io, and it is version 1.0. We deployed version 1.1 or dev, should I say. So if I switch over to this tab here, I have local host. So this is running locally, and you can quickly see the community tab, the community label has been applied, which was in my change, and then the version for that builder. So this is reading from that pre-release binary, that pre-release tag, which is 1.0.1/dev. And then we take a quick look at our order page. We'll see that it is, again, the community label. I'm not going to refresh because since it's running in behind a container, it does take a little time to refresh. So I'm saving you the pain of watching a screen load. Okay, so what do we have? So we're coming back here. We're back at we're back at our terminal. So I showed step one, which was the auto generation of docs, right? Oops. The struct markdown. We have the release. Sorry, the render docs, right? So okay. So we generate these docs. We get part of the release, and then I showed the adding them to the GitHub website, sorry, the Packer.io website, and you simply once your local environment looks good to you, you can go over to Packer.io. Let's see. And open up a pull request to add plugin documentation, and we happen to have one right now. Right, and there you go, simple as that. And then once that's done and that gets merged, your files show up here alongside your plugins show up here alongside all the other plugins. So when folks want to come and find your great plugin, whether it be a provisioner, a post processor, or some new builder, they'll see it right here alongside all the other ones. And to finish it off, when they want to install it, right, I'm gonna sort of demo a different plugin here. This is a third-party plugin called Packer Plugin Comment. It's also one of our demo plugins. So when folks see your plugin on Packer.io and they want to try it out, they can take a simple build script, which I have right here. What's it called? Build. So here we're using this required plugins, calling the name of the plugin. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do Packer init. It's going to download that remote plugin automatically for you, and then you can start using your plugin. All that. So thanks again for tuning in, and I really hope you enjoyed this demo. And if I have some time, I'll answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wilkin. That was incredible. Really liked the ASCII art there at the end with the thank you. It's clearly an incredible plugin.
Yes. Love it. Thanks. Much love to the folks on the Packer team for creating that demo plugin.
One question that I had for you was for people out there looking to kind of create these plugins and release things and kind of get that overall experience. It's something that I don't feel like can be taken lightly. It takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of thought, definitely something that you want to measure twice or thrice and then cut once. What are some things that make it onto your checklist when it comes to releasing something? What are things that you, the absolute have-to-haves when it comes to that?
Well, are you talking just like the last mile release, or are you talking like the whole process?
I'd say more the last mile would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for cutting a release is, does the plugin actually work, right? I think, as it's very simple to sort of make changes and see that how, that things don't register the way that, they were registering before. When I say register, I mean when you run packer.build, it can no longer find that plugin, right? And sometimes we make these little mistakes that it just kind of changes things up. So So I think the first thing is I have this version that I want to release. Let me go ahead and build it locally, right? And all this, we have all this documented on our website on Extending Packer. We can build it locally, we can run it, install it locally, and we can run some test cases against it, right? And then once we know that that's good, it's a matter of checking the version. Okay, does this contain the latest version information for this plugin? Is it still referencing something old? Updating that. And then, double checking the documentation. So, I think this is where the tooling comes into place, right? So we always forget to update docs. So we go through and we comment everywhere we can, and we use our tools like Go Generate, that call Packer SDC that will generate all this documentation for us. So it's test this thing, validate the version, test the docs, right? And then run the local unit tests. We do it in that order because sometimes the unit test will pass, but when you actually run this thing, it doesn't quite work the same way, right? So we figured, if you happen to have acceptance testing for your plugin, I guess that accounts for the first part. But checklist, test it with an actual config, check the version, check the docs, and run Go Generate, test the unit test, and then push up, tag it, and we're done. It's a four-step process.
I love it. I love it. Great way to check for integrity. I really do feel like that's a big thing. I have been at places where I felt bad about asking, did this work before? And then hearing, no, it didn't. And then being like, oh, well, then let's reset our expectations and kind of talk about what we need to fix then. But all wonderful points. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Sweet. Well, then I have a question.
Oh, yes.
Which is, we've talked about what y'all are using this plugin for. We talked about the HashiCorp plugin. I'd love to hear about if you know of any interesting use cases or kind of out of the box use cases for Packer plugins from the community or even from within your own team, where you're using them for something unconventional or interesting, or that we wouldn't think of when we're thinking of how we would use Packer.
Oof. I don't have a good answer to that question. I wish I did. You definitely gave me some homework. I feel like other people on the team might have a better answer. I might have an answer. But I guess, yeah, I mean, the HashiCorp is an interesting one because that one does coffee and toppings and very interesting things. But I don't know off the top of my head. I can't think of any plugin that's doing something sort of out of the box, but I will go ask around now, and I'll drop that in the chat because I'm very curious to what's out there.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
All right.
And I did not mean to give you homework, but I'm excited to hear about what you find.
No, it's good. I appreciate that because it's. I think one thing we're finding, especially as we move away from this monolithic repo of having all the plugins bundled into Packer, is that we're finding all these great plugins that do various things, right? So this is all part of this discovery work, if you will. So I think a great question, and I'm sure they're out there.
Really looking forward to the day that when we're able to run some of those Git clones and don't have to download, petabytes of data. But unless it's fast, then maybe it's fine. Awesome. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Wilkin. It was a pleasure to have you today. Hope you can stick around and find some fun sessions for you to watch and not be in the driver's seat for. And awesome. Next up,